Hey man.
Hey, Sunay, how's it going, man?
All right, Chirag, how you doing?
Good, good.
All right, should we jump right in? I got a couple of things for you, and let's see where it goes from here. How's that sound?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so lots of media coverage on the president-elect's cabinet picks. I was really curious about RFK. I mean, obviously working in healthcare, pharma industry for many years, and now right in healthcare. The RFK pick is very interesting to me. So I wanted to spend some time talking about that, and then I thought I know you had sent me some stuff on Brendan Carr as the FCC chairman pick, and obviously we spent a lot of time talking about social media on the pod, and that'll be a really interesting one for us to touch on. And then I thought we could chat a little bit about the impact that Elon is going to have in the cabinet and kind of the irony of his selection on a platform that was really focused on trying to get corporate money out of politics and be really it's really interesting to me, like kind of just how prominent of a role Elon is playing in the or seems to be playing currently and expected to play in the future of the administration. So, all right, how's that
Yeah,
sound? Yeah, want to get
yeah,
into it?
yeah, that sounds great. Let's get into it. So, I definitely want to start with the RFK Jr. So it's interesting. I think with RFK Jr., everyone knew that he was going to get some appointment of some kind because I'm sure that's the backroom deal that they made for him dropping out. And you could argue that he probably delivered the election to Trump, or is one of the primary reasons because he was pulling a lot of Republican votes in a lot of different swing states. So yeah, that's I'll just kind of set the background for that. But yeah, let's jump into it.
All right, cool. So, I mean, having worked in the industry a long time, worked in manufacturing, like literally in the factory lines making vaccines. Like I'm pro vaccination. I think they have done a lot to improve human health across the world, eliminate disease, eradicate disease, and I'm pro vaccine. And so, I think his nuanced points are somewhat extreme, but I think that there is kind of something healthy in his skepticism and his challenging of the commercialization of drugs and what the motivations are when drugs are commercialized. And I think that's worth talking about. I think that's worth kind of digging into to see if you have a drug or a therapy, I should say, that's discovered that could potentially eradicate a disease. Would that be of interest for a publicly traded, pharmaceutical company that's intended to deliver shareholder value as its charter and its mandate? And if you are going to spend billions of dollars researching this drug and then not be able to recoup your investments because it's going to just be something that you have to give away for social good, or because over time you're only going to have a finite number of people that you're going to be able to treat this disease with, and then you just become a commodity business and you only get your in the US whatever 3.7 million new patients every year, and it doesn't really drive profits because it just reaches a steady state. So vaccinations as a business have always been not like the primary focus area of pharmaceutical companies, rather, retail drugs, now specialty drugs are where a lot of the investments are to deliver shareholder value and also to improve human health. So I don't know. I find it very interesting. I find him very interesting because of his vaccination views. And I also find it very interesting on what impact he is going to have on the whole pharmaceutical industry, given his position on vaccines and more broadly the industry as a whole of kind of the profiteering and the abuses of society that he claims the industry has made. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't mind a healthy skepticism, right? I too believe in vaccines. I think people tend to have a short memory when it comes to disease and vaccines, right? So we haven't had in our lifetimes a lot of diseases that were eradicated, not that long ago when you look at it in the course of human history, right? But those diseases are horrible. I mean, you look at, mumps, even the flu, Spanish flu of the, early 1900s, it killed tens of millions of people. Same thing with mumps, measles. These are like horrible diseases that we eradicated, and now, unfortunately, making a comeback because of all the vaccine skepticism. On your point of the pharmaceutical industry, And profits, I think people tend to make an error there in that, yes, the pharmaceutical industries are out to make a profit, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think we talk about moral capitalism all the time, right? Where I think companies can make a profit and still behave in a moral way. Are there abuses? Sure. Are there, is there greed? Absolutely. The pharmaceutical industry spends probably what billions of dollars on lobbying, all right? And because of that lobbying, they're allowed to spend millions or billions of dollars on marketing, which you can argue is not healthy for society to be marketed to directly by pharmaceutical companies. So, but at the same time, even with that, I think it can still be a force for good overall. And I think it is mostly, right? With the proper regulations. In that way, I kind of agree with what a lot of what RFK Jr. says that, the pharmaceutical industry needs to be regulated. I think that's a good thing. I used to work on the pharma side. I worked in consumer products. You just kind of deal with regulation as it comes, right? The industry will adjust and they'll figure it out because they'll have no choice. The question is, how far reaching will the regulations be? And will it stall the industry, right? See, I'm kind of rambling there, but
No, I
I don't
got you,
know.
man.
Yeah,
I think you like two things that like two takeaways I have from what you said. Number one is like in any industry, there will always be bad actors and there will always be companies that will do unethical, immoral things to drive a profit, i.e. Purdue Pharma. I mean, like the way that they distributed opioids and painkillers at a like just unregulated, unethical, just like immoral way is absolutely unacceptable. And the industry should have done more and spoken out more about it earlier than they did. On the flip side, you have, I mean, you know, drugs that literally save people's lives. If you think of a vaccine that prevents cervical cancer, like tens of thousands of people got cervical cancer. Now you have a drug that eliminates cervical cancer. Hepatitis C, therapies are out there good enough now where, you basically can cure and eliminate hepatitis C if you get it. AIDS treatments, although we don't have a cure for AIDS or a prevention, the treatments are good enough now that your life expectancy is the same as somebody without AIDS. So there's there's more good that's come out of the industry than bad, but the good never gets the headlines, right? No question. I mean, we all know
right,
that that's kind of the case. But I don't know how to balance the self-regulated moral companies against those companies that are bad actors that need to be regulated and still have a healthy industry. To your point that I want it to be a capitalistic, I want there to be a monetary reward for a company that comes up with a very difficult cure for a very difficult disease because they're going to have spent 5 to 10 years of hardcore science and trials and experiments to get to that point. They deserve some rewards for that. And we as consumers should expect to pay a high price for that because that's how that's how capitalism should work. If there's a high value, there should be a high cost, right? Like
right,
that's only fair. So I think all of those fundamental pieces are good and the right approach, but it's kind of like what we talk about and where the RFK, kind of, you know, um, nomination is going to be really interesting is how does he balance that? How does he like not throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? You do
right,
have some good companies doing things morally, yet you have bad actors doing stuff immorally. Like you don't want to overregulate one over the other, but you still want to make sure that, for example, we're not doing clinical trials on brand new therapies on humans and killing people because, like, we haven't done enough due diligence before we start doing human trials, right? Like, en masse, and, like, that's a risk. That's a societal risk. We could decide that people that are in mental health institutions, we're going to just use for clinical trials because that's the value they can give society, like crazy shit.
yeah,
And that's what you do have to prevent from happening. Like, that's why you need some regulation so we don't go that far.
right, absolutely. Yeah, agreed. And it's an interesting um, kind of dichotomy, right? RFK Jr. comes in with talking about a lot of regulation, and it's seemingly the drive of the incoming Trump administration, and even for the first round, the first Trump administration was deregulation, and a lot of it, right? When it
Yep,
comes to a lot of different areas, environmental protections, financial protections. So this is kind of the opposite of that. So it's interesting that he's nominated someone who is for some serious regulation. I think there's a balance to be struck on the pharma side, and then also on the on the food side, because it seems like he's going to have lots to say about the food industry. And honestly, I probably agree with some of that, right? Because factory farming and a lot of the kind of excesses of the food industry do need to be pulled back, and I don't think they have been for a long time. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
I agree. I'm excited actually to see what he is going to do with the food industry. I think that industry does need to be shaken up and regulated a lot more than we have been. I mean, we have the most lax food regulations in the world, like of anywhere. There's stuff that we allow in terms of food dyes and additives and ingredients in our country that we can't sell, or Europe has banned, or the UK has banned, and you know that we still allow our consumers to eat. I think things like partially hydrogenated oils. Like
Mhm.
I don't think Europe allows that anymore. But, certain food dyes. I don't know if it's Red 40 or Red 4 or whatever. I think in other parts of the world has been banned. I think we still allow it here, or we're talking about banning it. So, like, there's definitely opportunities for us to get smarter about our food, about just healthier access to food, and I mean, I don't know. I feel like so much of our disease prevalence is attributed to the shortcuts that we're taking in, making shelf-stable foods. Like, bread should not be able to sit on my counter and last 3 weeks and not have mold grow on it. Like,
Right.
there's something wrong with it. Like, we're eating shit that is not naturally intended for us to consume just so that, the bread sits on our countertop for a few weeks and we don't have to go buy a fresh loaf, so
Yeah, yeah, so true. At a minimum, I think what my hope is that this at least brings up some healthy debate about that, right? Because going back to our previous discussions on trust in science, there is a certain level of trust the science or trust the establishment, and in certain areas like we're talking about with pharma and with food, there probably needs to be some questioning of it, right? Where scientists probably are involved in a lot of the guidelines around food, and maybe we do need someone to come in and shake it up. So I think I'm hoping it'll be a good thing, and I hope they strike the right balance with regulation, and see we'll see what happens.
yeah. Yeah, I agree, man. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. Let's see. Let's give it a shot. I mean, I feel like there there needs to be some type of a shakeup, and maybe this is the shakeup that we need, and maybe it'll get all of us back to the table to have good, healthy dialogue for good compromises. And I think we'll get to that a little bit later as well. But
Yeah.
maybe we switch gears over to the Brendan Carr nomination, and talk a little bit about what his implications could be for social media, and just how we interact with each other through the digital channels, potential implications on AI. I don't know. I know you had some thoughts there. I'll why don't you kick this one off?
Yeah, so it is interesting. So Brendan Carr, he wrote the chapter on the FCC in the Project 2025 playbook or whatever you want to call it. And one of his main goals was reining in big tech. And I was reading through a bullet point list of kind of his major or what his major policy goals would be, and honestly don't disagree with a lot of them. I think social media does need to be reined in. I don't know. I don't know what the motive is. That's the only thing I question, right? I think when we talk about social media, our motive is mental health, and kind of just our kids' mental health and how our society is being affected by social media. I think a, a lot on the political side of things, I think when people talk about reigning in big tech. It's more about censorship, and that is a different argument and a different topic altogether. And that's an interesting one because, I know people like Elon Musk when he bought Twitter, he's a free speech absolutist, and I think that obviously that's a slippery slope. He doesn't think platforms should be able to regulate speech on their platforms, that it should be a free reign for the users. And I don't agree with that. But there's the everyone knows the old saying, you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. And that the limit of free speech is when you start infringing upon other people's rights, right? So yeah, that's an interesting one. But at the same time, how do you grant a platform permission, or who's to draw the line on what is considered free speech or acceptable free speech and what isn't? That's where you get into a tricky kind of situation, because then you're leaving it up to the person's judgment, and everyone has their own biases, and it, I don't know. I don't know how I don't even know, like, that's a whole thing that I don't even know how to regulate or how we would even
Yeah.
tackle.
Oh my god. I was thinking the exact same thing, man, because it's like, we can call it free speech, but is it really, well, you're just not in agreement with what I wanna say. Like, if
Right.
you agree with me, then it's free, but if you disagree with me, then it's not free, right? Like, you have to
Yeah.
have, I think, a certain level of, maybe self-awareness might not be the right word, but you have to have a certain level of, like, gosh, like, humility maybe is the right
Mhm.
word? Almost like you have to really want something for the greater good, regardless of what it means for you. I'm sure there's a word for it. I can't think of what it is, but like, you have to truly be agnostic to your role. And if you're not, then it's like, okay, well, if any media outlet doesn't agree wholeheartedly with my points of view, then let's cancel them. Which is kind of like the reverse of what they feel wokeism is, right? Like
Mhm.
wokeism is, all of our quote mainstream media, CBS, NBC, I guess not Fox, but like ABC News, CNN, MSNBC, like anybody except for Fox and Fox News is like mainstream media, and that's owned by the liberals. And so there's this, I guess, kind of concern of an overcorrection that now says, okay, if you've got, conservative voices that are now going to be taking over the FCC, I agree with free speech, of course, obviously. But I think fundamentally what I would, I really want to understand, and this is the question that I think, you and I have debated a lot, but like, how do we continue to have a dialogue between conservatives and liberals and woke and, I don't even know what the hell the opposite of woke is. MAGA?
Yeah, I guess.
Like, how do we have those conversations if we can't get grounded in fundamental truths? Like, we really need to find a way to go back to establishing truths, and not two sets of truths between the two sides, but like the truth, like absolute truth that everybody agrees on. It's not a theory, but it's a fact.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
it's very hard to do. We spend lots of time talking about that on the pod, that truth is very
Yeah.
difficult to nail down, right? And maybe this is Yuval or someone else that we've listened to that talks about data is cheap, data is everywhere, but it's the insight, it's the action that's hard to get to. It's the truth that's hard to get to amongst all the data. And so that's the same thing when it comes to all this social media and information and all the crap that people are getting their 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 news from, if you even call it news anymore, that they're getting their journalism from. More people tuned into to Joe Rogan than they did to any of the network television shows,
Right.
maybe combined, right? Like 20 million viewers for Rogan, maybe a few million for all the network TVs.
Yeah. So true. It's really, yeah, and it doesn't help with the echo chambers we create for ourselves, right? So the one that's occurring to me now is, since the election, droves of users have been going from X to Blue Sky, and it's been
Yeah.
all over the news. And now, and I think a lot of them would probably you probably consider left leaning or more mainstream. They're being driven away from X because of Elon Musk and his stance, and a lot of what is kind of put out on that platform on X. And so what you have created is, an echo chamber for probably more right leaning people, and now Blue Sky will probably be an echo chamber for more left-leaning people. So it's the kind of, technology has given us so much, but it also, with that freedom to do whatever we want with, on different platforms, we as human beings, because we're so tribal, we tend to fall into our own tribes, into our own camps, and we want to hear that what we believe is the right thing. And so we tend to just fall into that, right? And we just want to be around people who agree with us. And unfortunately, I don't think that's good for society. I mean, before social media, before we had 2 or 3 news networks and that was it. And everyone listened to the same news and we had like you said, a source of truth that we all agreed on. And now it's getting to the point where we can't do that anymore because of just the way the media landscape has played out.
One trend that is encouraging, though, is if people are moving away from what I guess our traditional news sources were, because I mean, let's be honest, man, it's fucking entertainment. Like, it's not
Yeah.
news. Like,
Yeah.
nothing there is news anymore. It's just like bullshit ways of sound bites and sound clips and exaggerations and fancy buzzwords and phrases that get you sucked in to listen to the next, you know, stupid bit that they have teed up for you. Like, it's not
Right.
journalism, it's garbage. Like, like straight up. What's encouraging for me is podcasts. I mean, look, even like Joe Rogan, like, because it's long form, it allows you to get into discussion, it allows you to get into nuances and have a healthier debate that inevitably, I would say, is going to lead to a more intimate experience and a closing of the gap between two sides. I listen to Lex Friedman a lot. I've listened to Huberman podcast.
Mhm.
Like, I listen to some of these like longer form podcasts, man, and it's awesome because, it's not just some catchy soundbite to get you to listen. Like, people have good, deep intellectual debates that I think will get everybody to realize that we're more similar than different. And the motivations for podcasts aren't to be divisive, whereas I feel like the motivations for network television now are 100% aimed at that. Your point on the echo chamber, like, social media's objective is to shock you to continue to stay addicted and see the next article on their on their platform. I think the long form podcast to
The
me,
time is
you
10
know,
p.m. Lights out.
thank you. I think could save us. I mean, I think podcasts could be a huge source of, intellectual debate that allows for the creation of policies, that allows for the creation of thoughts and social discourse, civil social discourse that has better outcomes for us as a society.
Yeah. No, very true. So when you mentioned that, it made me think of one I saw recently, or one, it was on YouTube, but it was a podcast, and it was a debate between Richard Dawkins and Jordan Peterson about religion. And it was what I mean, the debate was fine. It was what you would expect from Richard Dawkins and from Jordan Peterson. Obviously Jordan Peterson comes at it from the religious perspective, and Richard Dawkins from secular and scientific perspective. But what I found interesting was that they weren't. It was a lot, obviously long form discussion, and they were, they had a moderator, and they were talking about a lot of different topics. But what struck me was that they weren't just looking to win points with their arguments. They were truly trying to understand one another. I think especially in mainstream media or even in social media, Jordan Peterson gets painted as a, right wing, crazy person, and Dawkins, same thing, left wing crazy person, right? But when you put them on the same in the same room and actually allow them to have a discussion in that kind of way, they're not just trying to win points. And at one point, Jordan Peterson's like, "Yeah, I truly want to understand your point of view and help me understand why you disagree with my one point, that point I'm making." And it just came across as a very, like, human way. Like, it wasn't staged. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't about winning points. It was truly about trying to understand one another and understand the other person's perspective. And I found that really refreshing. And it goes to your point about how I think long form can do that. One counterpoint, though, like, I do like long form overall, but there's so much long form out there. And this goes back to my whole thing about just how much content is out there,
Hmm.
how do you filter, because you could get into the situation where, okay, they're the big ones, right? There's Joe Rogan, there's Lex Friedman, and then you create another kind of form of mainstream media, and then it could devolve into something similar, right? Where, yeah, they're the big ones, everyone listens to them, but then they kind of devolve into what the old media was, and then you have maybe fresh new voices coming on. I guess the one good thing is that you do have the opportunity for fresh voices to come in because of the access to technology. But I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, totally. I think it's going to be based off of who has the best ideas and who's able to curate and share thoughts that are interesting. And to me, novel ideas are interesting. And I think it's going to be very much on like what you talked about, I think the last episode or the episode before, where it's like, even if you don't listen to the podcast, if you create content that's good enough, it makes its way into the social discourse, like what used to be water
Right.
cooler talk, right? And I
Yeah.
think that like Joe Rogan has already reached that. Like when he had, oh my God, what's the guy from the Marvel movies, Terrence Howard on,
Terrence Howard. Yeah.
right? Like that was everywhere, right? Like everybody heard about the Terrence Howard episode because it was out there, it was crazy and controversial, and maybe that drew more viewers to Joe, and maybe that was his objective. I don't know. But
Sure.
I think to answer your question, I think that's like what good entertainment does is it gets people talking about it, and then it makes its way into the kind of whatever the discourse platform, whatever we call that,
Mhm.
the ethos.
Right. The
But
zeitgeist.
the zeitgeist, thank you. Nice. Nice. And then like, if there's counterpoints and like further debating and disputing certain claims that are made, like you saw Neil deGrasse Tyson post a retort to that. Like that was
Yeah.
awesome. Like I think
That was
that's
great.
all good stuff, right? Like that's a healthier way to have a debate and a discussion than like going to Twitter and just like bashing your uncle because he's like woke or something, or
Mhm.
bashing your grandma because she voted for Trump. Like, what the fuck is that going to do? Like nothing. It does absolutely nothing other than make the social media platforms richer. And maybe some of that is true for podcasts, but it at least forces you to think a little. It takes the
Yeah.
dumbness away. It takes the just endorphin high of like, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, you're right. I got to agree with that. Of course, this is why I'm right. No, like have some nuanced conversation, have experts weigh in and drive a belief and drive a truth. And I think like if there's one premise that I see coming in this next administration, and this is some of the things that you heard both from RFK and you heard from Carr, is that they want to build more transparency in government. Now, if that's true, great. Like, I hope that the transparency isn't kind of like, you know, uh, like, like a smokescreen for like this ultra conservative political agenda. Who knows?
Right.
I don't know. But I hope it truly is transparency. I mean, David Carr was talking. I mean, sorry, Derek Carr or whatever, Brendan Carr was talking about making the algorithms public that drive the repetition of content that's going to get you raged and more engaged and get you the endorphin so that everybody knows it and they can be honest with it and put like a light on something that's bad and disinfect it a little bit. So I'm hopeful, man. I think that type of visibility, transparency, openness can perhaps restore trust in experts again. We have to get back to believing in experts, and I think that can help us with getting truth back.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's much needed for sure. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, just think about the books and the things that you read and that we reference, and even going back to the debate between Jordan Peterson and what was the
Dawkins.
guy's name? Dawkins. Thank you. Like
Yeah.
I watched some of that. Both of them are freaking brilliant.
Yeah.
They're both really smart, intelligent people, well articulate, well read, articulate. And you're like, okay, if you're on the conservative side, you think the liberals are all stupid. If you're on the liberal side, you think the conservatives are all stupid. And here you have an example of two really smart guys having a really good, healthy debate. And honestly, 90% of the shit they agree on. They're they're they're
Right.
they're in that 10% where they're just like, yeah, let's hash this out and put some work
Mhm.
towards this. Like that was the best takeaway that I had was like, yeah, there's smart people on both sides trying to figure this out. And let all that good energy kind of filter their way up to the zeitgeist.
Right. Yeah,
Get
so
more
true.
people engaged.
Yeah, and hopefully that can drown out some of the bad actors and some of the people who are not acting in good faith on either side, right? And hopefully the good voices, the intellectual voices can kind of rise to the top. And you're right. I think I referred to that a couple episodes ago. That kind of the cream will rise to the top, and we have to have trust in that. And unfortunately, I think social media drowns that out sometimes. But
Mm.
yeah, hopefully maybe regulation will help.
I hope so. I mean, it's like I feel like there was this underlying belief that the conservatives haven't had a turn at bat in a while, you know? And I feel like that's kind of what I felt in the mood since the election was this like excitement about another kid having a turn at bat. Even though obviously we had a Trump administration, but for whatever reason there just seems to be a different vibe with this incoming administration where it's not as much of like I don't know, like I mean there's definitely concern from I think from the parties they still exist, but there's almost like this, like, exhale, I felt like, that's like, "Okay, there wasn't this big, like, crazy controversy, like, with the election, like, we knew the night of, like, which is, like, nobody was expecting, I thought, and
Yeah,
and it was a landslide, so there's just this, like, acceptance of, like, this is where the country wants to go. So we have to let it happen." Like, there's
yeah,
almost this, like, "Alright, like, the country has spoken, it's just let's see what happens. Let's see, like, let's follow it. Let's try to make it successful, and like let's see what the other, let's see what the other side can do.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I mean, you're right. I think there was that perception that they haven't had their chance, but now it is fully, they have all branches of government, executive, judicial, fully, just about, right? I mean, they have
Yeah,
a clear majority in the judicial, and yeah, and then
and
the
they got the
Senate and Congress.
legislative. Yeah, they got
Yeah,
the whole legislative branch too, and pretty
yeah,
pretty good majorities. So yeah, they got the whole thing, man. At least for 2 years.
right.
And hopefully they can do some good with it. I'll tee up the last topic here. Because I think it's super interesting in my conversations um, with my conservative friends. Um, like some one is pretty hardcore MAGA. The others I would say are not like hardcore MAGA, but are conservative. And one of the things that we both agree upon, like very, very strongly, is we need to get our corporate lobbyists out of Washington. We need to get a separation between corporations doing what corporations do and not impacting government policies to the degree with which they're able to right now. We all like violent agreement, right? And I think like there's just like we need some disruption so that the lobbyists can get out and we can actually pass policies that will allow that to happen. And I honestly, like when I look at the Democratic Party, I didn't see any of that happening in the Democratic Party. I just didn't see it.
Yep,
I wanted to believe it, but honestly I didn't see it. So if there's policies that the Trump administration can roll out, like for example, number one, if you give work in the private sector and you give like, significant campaign donations to a given, political party, like you shouldn't be able to go and get a job in that administration like right away. And if you work in, the government and let's say you're getting grants from private corporations and like you have to wait 5 years before you can go and get a job at a corporation again. Like there
yep,
needs to be some waiting period between both sides so that it's not just like a revolving door of like, well, yeah, well, Goldman Sachs CEOs go right into the Treasury Department and then the Treasury Department feeds back to Goldman Sachs. And there's just this like revolving door, right? Like it's not healthy. The perception's bad. It looks bad for our government, and the outcomes are bad because you're not representing the people anymore. You're
yep,
representing your own corporate self-interest. And so if we get a healthy correction under this new administration, then I'm excited for that. I think that's a good thing. I think we'll have better policies. I think we'll have better representation of what we want to see in our country than just what will benefit corporations. Even though I work for one, like I don't want us to have all the chips in the poker game. Like I want there to
Mhm.
be an equal
Yeah.
distribution and a strong middle class. And quite honestly, man, like the Elon nomination makes me a little nervous because I feel
Yeah.
like that goes against what Trump's administration was supposed to say in we want to separate out, corporate leaders and corporate greed from the government. And then you've got the richest man in the world literally like, you know, I agree RFK helped Trump win the election. There's no doubt in my mind that Elon also helped
Oh,
Trump
yeah,
win the election
for sure.
significantly. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe if not more, or at least as much as RFK did, because like I think he gave Trump credibility and a level head that was going to help him to run the country. And so that is an area where I feel like it doesn't align with what Trump and the conservative movement was in favor of getting policies that would take corporations out of government.
Yeah,
What are your
it's
thoughts?
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. So I think it has to start from the top, right? And I think a counterpoint to that is that they had the first term to quote unquote drain the swamp, and it didn't happen. And I think a lot of people on the right would argue that the deep state and
Yeah.
people entrenched in the government wouldn't allow it to happen. Sure, okay, fine, I'll give you that. But you know, Jimmy Carter had to give up a fucking peanut farm when he became president,
This is true.
and
This
and
is true.
I think it would have been a big scandal if he hadn't. Donald Trump has continued to be the head of his corporations and his business interests, and there's a real conflict of interest there, especially when he has foreign dignitaries staying at his hotels. Yeah, he makes the Secret Service pay for hotel rooms at his properties. It's hard not to think that he's lining his pockets with the power he has attained now for a second time. So I think if they really want to drain the swamp and send a message, then it has to start from the top. And I just don't see that happening, unfortunately. So that's the first thing. With the whole Elon thing, it's a dangerous road when you have a titan of industry have such a heavy role in a government administration, right? I mean, you look at what Russia has become; it's essentially an oligarchy, and if he truly has a say, I mean, I think he was on the phone with Trump and Zelensky not long after Trump was elected, and if he has some say in government policy, what's to say that he wouldn't pick and choose regulations that would help Tesla and hurt other car makers, right? I mean, like you said, I think that there should be some separation between the political sphere and the business sphere. And this does not fill me with hope, having Elon Musk in charge of government efficiency and maybe having some say in government regulations.
This is where like you have to be so careful because you're now getting to levels of like, what you'd call a plutocracy, right? Where the government is run by the wealthy. I mean, it's like textbook. Literally, the freaking richest man in the world is running a very important branch of this new administration. I mean, he even made up the fucking branch of the government, Doge,
Yeah.
like off of a meme currency that they that they put out to like further line their pocket. Like they're laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah.
They created a fake currency that has absolutely no value other than marketing, put it out in the market for pennies, and then name the very government office that he gets elected to run off of that crypto coin. Like, this is where I feel like if we have healthy debates, and the point that you made was so brilliant of like, guys, like, you got to work with me here. If you want to have compromise and a healthy democracy, when the leader of the free world is in your face lining his pockets through policy, can we all agree that's a bad thing? Like, let's talk about the social policies, but let's set the basic moral and ethical ground rules up that we want our leaders to represent. And to me, that's one. You don't want there to be bias in policy by your government based off of what's going to be in the financial best interest of the individual in office. That has to be separated. Like, we have to have that fundamental rule. Otherwise, we open up the whole credibility of why are they making these policy decisions. Like, you didn't like it and you called it woke if, the news agencies are owned by Disney and entertainment agencies and they're just pumping out entertainment. Okay. Well, if the government is basically the individuals in power in our government are financially benefiting from their policies, like, aren't you going to question every policy then? Like, it's not a good look. It's not a place that we want our democracy to go if we're going to be the best and healthiest democracy in the world. It's a very slippery slope, and we're going faster and faster down it. And some of the stuff in 2025 is scary, related to the power of the executive branch and eliminating the separation of powers across the three branches of government. Like let's be careful with playing with fire here. I think we have to keep. It's a great point that you made, and I think we have to keep that in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, for sure. I think one like healthy challenge I would put out to our listeners, and it doesn't matter your political affiliation, but ask yourself when you hear about something that your own side is doing, ask yourself if you flipped it, if it was someone from the other side doing it, would you have a problem with it? And be honest with yourself. And if you think you would not be okay with it, then you shouldn't be okay with it when your side does it, right? And just remove all political affiliations and just truly ask yourself if someone from my side did it, would I have, or sorry, someone from their side did it, would I have a problem with it? And, I think you have to truly be self-critical about that. And I hope that can kind of, create some moral and ethical drive in us as citizens and lead to a healthier democracy.
Couldn't agree more, man. The golden rule. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, just follow the golden rule. I mean, it really is that simple. And I mean, I'll maybe, like, just a really quick story on that one, right? Like, my father-in-law at my wedding, he gave a speech, and I'll never forget. He's like, "I have only one piece of advice for you as you guys embark upon this journey, and as you continue into this world together. If you treat others the way you want to be treated, you can never go wrong in any decision you make."
Mm,
And just that was it. Like, that was it. Like, just very simple, concise, like the golden rule. And you echoed it, and it's a great way to end the pod today, man. It's just
yeah,
follow the golden rule. If you wouldn't want the other side doing this, then don't do it. And call it out, and call your own side out, and be
100%.
be a citizen. Like, like, democracy is greater than Republican, Democrat.
Yeah,
And focus on the democracy, right? Like that, like, we're there. Like, we have to focus on the democracy. Be very wary of plutocracy. If you don't know what it is, Google it. It's power by the
yeah,
wealthy. Let's not go there. Oligarchy is power by the few. Like, let's
right.
not go there either. Let's go for democracy. Like, it's the best form of government we all have.
Yeah, it's all best only form that makes sense. Yeah, let's do that. I'll end on another note. A similar
Cool.
note is that I just read an anecdote about how when Putin became president, there was a lot of opposition to him. Once he became, and I'm not comparing Trump to Putin or anything like that, but um, when he became president or elected president, a lot of the opposition, the people who were opposed, just tuned out of politics because they were just so, you know, defeated. I just want to urge people to to not tune out. Don't tune out. Be engaged, especially locally, and just be engaged politically as much as you can. And I think it's essential for a healthy democracy. And so I'll just end it there.
Best way to end it, man. That's the pod. Love it. What an ending.
That's
What a story and a point, man.
yeah. All
Good
right,
stuff.
sounds good. That's a pod.
That's it, man. All right. Next time, don't forget, question everything.
Except this podcast.
All right.
See you
Peace
next
out.
time.